A Kirk Cousins sighting in Cleveland? Is it real? Could it be? We'll talk about it coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Kirk Cousins was apparently spotted in Cleveland at multiple fast food chains on Thursday. What does it mean? We'll talk about it. I feel like the Browns quarterback and draft plan is potentially starting to take shape after this last week, and it's a no-brainer for the Browns to trade back up into the first round to take whoever they're going to take as their second player in the draft. I do want to thank you for being in every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every Monday through Friday, guaranteed with bonus content on some weekends, and it's totally free to you. All you got to do, hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you listen to your podcast, and of course, the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can also get involved in the show, share your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comments section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And I got to be honest, when pictures of Kirk Cousins at Chipotle and other local fast food establishments popped up on my Twitter feed on Thursday evening, I didn't really know what to think, because in the world we live in today, in a media world that I work in today, I feel like I'm taught at this point just to be jaded, like not believe anything. It's all fake. It's AI generated. It's Photoshop, whatever it is. And so I never really know what to believe. And so, we just had earlier in the week, for example, a fake Deion Sanders quote go viral as everyone tried to dissect if it was real or not about Shador wanting to end up with the Giants. So there's that. I don't trust anything anymore. I mean, you got fake coach press conferences now that are made by AI where they're just like ripping into people all the time that are popping up on my feed, and people get got by those. So you got to be careful out here in these Twitter streets not to get got. And so that was my initial thought, was like, there's no way this is real. This is just some scheme. Like somebody found this picture and they shared it and said it was in Cleveland. And it was like the Bill Cowher, surveying the housing market in Strongsville when that was a thing back in the day. Like this, all these things kind of come back in your memory bank from other crazy Cleveland offseason stories. But as it turns out, this is 100% real. This is Kirk Cousins in Cleveland for some event reportedly unrelated to football, reportedly, has nothing to do with the Browns whatsoever or visiting with the Browns whatsoever, but he's in town, and it caused a tizzy among Browns fans in Cleveland in general, because everyone thought he was here for something different and that maybe he was meeting with the Browns on Friday. Now, as I figured more about the situation, and I came to realize, like, okay, here's where we're at with this thing. It's real. It's 100% real. My first thought was like, it makes sense that he'd be here for something other than meeting with the Browns, because the Browns brass is like all over the place right now. They were just in Miami earlier in the week for Cam Ward's private workout. There's more pro days to come. Abdul Carter, who isn't working out at his pro day anymore, but Penn State's pro day is on Friday. So like, they're sort of all over the place. Where would they have met with him in Cleveland to like make that happen? It wouldn't have made sense. It wouldn't have added up necessarily for that to sort of transpire that way. The Falcons also would have had to give permission to Kirk Cousins to meet with the Browns and talk to him and basically get a sense of, what they could sort of necessitate or figure out in terms of a trade. And none of those things have been talked about or reported or been made or happened at this point. So it makes sense that it wasn't about football. What it is, I don't have full clarity on, but the idea that he's here for something unrelated to football, it adds up. There is real traction there. It's true. But here's the thing, like, this just is the latest twist and turn in what is easily one of the wildest, if not the wildest. Like, we've reached critical mass with this Browns off season, and we're still a month away from the draft. Like, we still have a little less than a month until the NFL draft, and this is where we're at. Like, Kirk Cousins showing up at a local Chipotle and people speculating on what it means and is he going to be a Cleveland Brown and have they already made a trade? Are they making a trade? All these different things just kind of come out of this, and it's wild. Like it's from the Myles Garrett trade request to him then signing and staying to the Browns quarterback situation that feels like every day we get a new layer and a new story and a new hint about them being in on this quarterback or that quarterback. And this one is maybe the wildest of all, that Kirk Cousins is randomly in Cleveland. Like the timing of it could not be more perfect in terms of like narratives, stories, all these things, because I mean, he's in Cleveland for at least one night at a time when he is being widely speculated to be the Browns' target, like the target for them as a veteran quarterback in some capacity in the veteran market. Like just absolutely wild. I don't know how we got here. I don't know how this all came to fruition. I don't know why Kirk Cousins is truly in town. I've reached out to try to get more information on that. But man, oh man, what a wild situation. And I will say, like, there have been some reporters, Albert Breer, Sports Illustrated being one of them, who has been banging the drum for this is where Kirk is ultimately going to end up, which is why it feels like sort of eerie and too coincidental that he's here at this time when that's the case. But he's been banging that drum. It does kind of feel like, and I'll talk about this more coming up as well, that it tracks that Kirk may ultimately end up being the quarterback for the Browns, and that it ultimately ends like this whole conversation, this whole saga of him showing up at these restaurants actually ends with him being in Cleveland, and the Browns don't take a quarterback at 2. This is what's been sort of reported this week, that the Browns maybe aren't looking quarterback at 2. And if that's the case, like maybe this ends after the draft with them pulling off that trade for Kirk Cousins. I've advised against it. I've said all along, my entire attraction to landing Kirk Cousins this offseason was based in the idea that he would be available as a free agent after the Falcons moved on from him because they weren't going to guarantee him that money. Now they guaranteed him the money. They are sticking to their guns. And it sounds like a trade won't be facilitated until after the draft. And so as we hear more about what the Browns draft plans might actually be, it's starting to feel like Kirk Cousins could sort of come to light as the route that they go, and they do swing a trade for him maybe at the end of April once the draft is sort of complete. This is purely speculation on my end at this point, but there are some people, tapped in people, saying that Kirk Cousins is still in play for the Browns, and it's just going to be a matter of like, does it end up playing out that way? And where do they kind of go from here? Because we've been asking that question of like, they have to be taking a quarterback at 2. Look at the quarterback room right now, but maybe their plan really ends with Kirk Cousins for all we know. But again, just so crazy, which is what makes this so absurdly ridiculous, that he's in Cleveland while all these conversations about his future potentially being in Cleveland are going on at the same time. What a wild, wild story. And one of those things that feels like it's very much a only in Cleveland type thing. Like only something that would happen with the Cleveland Browns, only something that would happen during a wild, crazy Cleveland Browns offseason. And that's why we're here to talk about it. But along the lines of Kirk Cousins maybe being part of this quarterback room, it does feel like this week that the Browns' plan at quarterback and the draft has sort of gotten maybe a little more of a clearer picture. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. It's no secret this time of year, we all want upsets in the tournament. They are the lifeblood of college basketball this time of year. Unfortunately, we didn't get too many in the first weekend like we would have hoped. That's okay. If you missed on some of those Cinderellas, FanDuel will get you has an easy way for you to earn back your money with spreads, totals, and game props for any of the remaining tournament games. If I've got my eye on Florida to win it all, I picked them in the one bracket that I filled out to win the entire tournament, and I'll probably throw some money their way in the FanDuel app here, which is easy to use. And when I win, I get paid instantly, no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com to get in the college hoops action all tournament long. Today's episode is brought to you by Epicor. Every team knows the value of hard work, of taking pride in what you build and practicing every detail to get the best results. But no one player, no matter how amazing, can do it all alone. Working together makes getting the win easier at Epicor. The all-stars are the hardworking manufacturers and distributors who create and deliver the things we all need, from aerospace to electrical to medical devices. Epicor ERP solutions are created by industry experts to help make every day easier. Seeing the whole supply chain is easier, managing logistics is easier, responding to price changes is easier. From small businesses with big dreams to growing enterprises with global visions, we'll equip you with the right tools to move forward, think ahead, and lead the way. Because as the clock ticks down, you need to make the most of every hard-working minute. Epicor doesn't cut corners. Easier finds the lane. Discover your success at www.easierwithepicor.com. That's www.easierwithepicor.com. All right, so in lieu of Kirk Cousins making a random appearance in Cleveland at local fast food establishments, I feel like this week I don't even want to say it's clarity, because I don't know that we really have clarity into what the Browns are doing right now. It feels more like nobody really has a full picture of what the Browns are going to do, when Adam Schefter's changed his mind 3 times and others have mocked different things to the Browns. But it does feel like this is the first week where there's been more general consensus about what the Browns are going to do. And I still think, they're kind of just throwing people off the scent right now. We don't have the full picture of it yet, but there's been a lot of talk about Abdul Carter at 2. And I feel like the more and more we hear about this, the more and more we, talk about this, and the more information that comes out, it feels like the Browns will end up passing on a quarterback at 2, and either taking Abdul Carter, maybe trading back, but it sounds like maybe taking Abdul Carter, and then drafting somebody like Jalen Milroe in the 2nd round, and then landing the man we just talked about for the whole first segment, Kirk Cousins, after the draft, when they can facilitate a trade, and he's going to be the guy that comes in. And they sort of promise him in that way, like, hey, we're not going to take somebody who's going to Wally Pip, or I guess it's not even called Wally Pippin anymore. It's called Michael Penixing. The way that went down in Atlanta. We are going to give you a legitimate starting space here in Cleveland, and that's going to be how this kind of goes down. That's starting to sort of feel like how this thing is taking shape, and that's just based on, again, how much smoke seems to be around the Browns taking Abdul Carter right now, how much we're hearing about the Browns still being linked to Kirk Cousins even after he wasn't released, and that they still could try to trade for him. Albert Breer has been banging that drum for a while, and he's as tapped in through Sports Illustrated as anybody. So, like, this is becoming, for me, because that feels like the direction it's going to go. But this feels like, at least sitting here today, but this feels like a very like heart versus my head thing right now. My heart still says they're going to go, or they should go, quarterback at 2, or do whatever they need to do, maybe to trade up even to get Cam Ward, right? Like, if the Titans are shopping that pick and the Browns love Cam Ward, they should do what it takes. I've talked about this already, to get up there, get Cam Ward, get their quarterback. No questions asked. Nobody would fault them for doing that, and they should, if that's where what their sights are set on. So my heart still tells me they're going to go quarterback at 2, or in some capacity, they're going to get a quarterback in this spot in the draft, because they know they need that position. Offense was historically bad. They can't possibly sit there and not address the most important position on the field, especially given how the offseason quarterback situation has played out, where all you have right now is Kenny Pickett in your room as a guy that can start for you and play for you next year. And he's not meant to sort of come in and be that guy. So my heart says that, but my head says they're going to pass altogether, take best player available, which probably ends up being Abdul Carter, and then get one of these other quarterbacks that's more of a developmental guy, someone who's going to need some time, probably going to have to sit, going to have to learn, going to kind of have to get himself acclimated to the league, and, have Kirk Cousins be the person sort of leading that charge once they pull off some sort of trade for him. And what's interesting about this too is, like, the quarterback I keep going back to that they would probably draft and is going to be the developmental piece, it feels like it's going to be Jalen Milroe. It's the Tommy Reese connection. It's more people talking about Milroe and how he's worked on his footwork already this offseason. He's taken some massive steps in that regard. And I respect all those things. I'm still very low on Milroe as a prospect coming out of college into the NFL. And it's no disrespect to the kid. I think he is a freak athlete, which is going to get him drafted pretty highly because teams invest in that. Teams, pick players based off of that. When you're an athlete, when you have something in your game of that nature that other people don't, the teams are willing to take a chance on you. And so I respect that about him. I also, as I've said numerous times, always leave some room for a guy to develop and get better. We can't write these guys off so quickly. Like, it does sometimes take time to get acclimated to the NFL game. And so I'm not going to sit here and write him off just because, I have a certain opinion about him right now, but I'm just not sold on him. And the biggest reason why is yeah, that's great that he's worked on his footwork. That's great that he looked better at the combine, and he, at his pro day, I'm sure he'll look fine, but I just can't get past the tape. And I also can't sit here and bang the drum for the tape's the most important thing. The tape's the most important thing. And then when push comes to shove, try to use all the other things to talk myself into Jalen Milroe. I can't do it. He was highly inaccurate at Alabama. I don't know if that's something that just gets automatically fixed, maybe with the footwork stuff that he's worked through, the footwork techniques that he's worked through. And some of that he does get better, but I can't overlook what he put out there on tape as the thing that's kind of a roadblock for me when it comes to Milroe. So I'm still sort of low on him, but it feels like that could be the room that gets formulated, something that looks like Kenny Pickett, Kirk Cousins, taking Jalen Milroe maybe at 33, or maybe they trade back up into the first round to get a fifth-year option on him, and they get him that way, and then they have this quote-unquote quarterback for the future on top of Kirk Cousins to go along with it, and they're sort of riding off that way, and that's how they sort of sell it. This feels like after this week, the situation that the Browns are going to find themselves in, the quarterback room that sort of is starting to feel like it could be what takes shape. And again, it's where my head is at. My heart is still telling me they go quarterback at 2 with a Shedeur Sanders, maybe trade up and get Cam Ward, something like that. But my head is telling me something different just based on what's been reported this week, what's been said this week, the adamancy from some people that Kirk Cousins is still very much in play for the Browns, and the idea that they're going to pass on a quarterback at 2 and take Abdul Carter, which has come more to light this week as well. I don't know what you think. Maybe you feel what my heart is saying is more right than my head. I still can't fathom them not taking a quarterback when the offense was historically bad last year, as gruesome as it was to watch. How can you pass that up at that part of the draft? But if they don't like them, I guess you got to do best player available, and that probably would be Abdul Carter in that instance. So I guess that makes some sense. But what would you think of that scenario where it becomes a quarterback room of Kirk Cousins, Jalen Milroe, Kenny Pickett? Let me know your thoughts. In the meantime, when it comes to the Browns draft plans, there's one thing that I think is an absolute no-brainer. I actually alluded to it moments ago. We'll talk about it more in depth coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. So when it comes to figuring out the Browns draft plans, there's one thing that I think feels like an absolute no-brainer for this team that they should do no matter what, and that is trade back up into the first round. Now, the premise of this all stems from the idea that listen, they could take a quarterback at 2. I still think they should trade back up into the first round, but they might not. Off of the conversation I just had, where I'm mapping out okay, maybe they end up with Kirk Cousins. They got Kenny Pickett already. Maybe they drafted Jalen Milroe in the second round or something like that, and that's their quarterback room. All right, fine. If you're going to take Jalen Milroe, though, if you pass on a quarterback at 2 when you take Abdul Carter, I can wrap my head around that. But then if your plan is we're taking a quarterback at 33 and you have your guy pinpointed, Milroe, Dart, whoever it's going to be, you should trade back up into the first round to get him every single time, because that fifth-year option is so valuable. If you hit on this quarterback, if you get this right, you're going to want that fifth-year option. You're going to want the control of this player for multiple years, not just – you're going to want that extra year tacked on before you have to pay them big and give them that massive contract that all these cornerbacks obviously warrant at this point, and that the market sort of dictates they get that money. And so that matters. That matters in the scheme of how you're building this roster. It matters in terms of what the financial situation is going to look like moving forward for this team. So, and those are all things that this team has to think about. So in the ilk, or in the thought process of, sure, they take Abdul Carter, they wait, they go get their quarterback. That quarterback should be somebody that they trade back up into the first round to get, simply because If they think that the player is going to be worth it, if they already have their eyes on somebody at 33, why wait? Why wait till 33? Trade up, get him a little bit earlier, get that fifth year option, even if it's one pick earlier. Just make it happen, because that fifth year option is too valuable, especially to have on a quarterback, to not do it. But on the flip side of that, even if they don't do the scenario that we mapped out of Abdul Carter piece the quarterback room together in a different way, including with maybe Jalen Milroe and maybe a Kirk Cousins, or even if it's Carson Wentz or whatever, fine. Like even if they do take a quarterback at 2, even if they decide, you know what, Shador Sanders, our guy, we're going to take him at 2, and they don't do the setup I just gave you with the veteran and a Jalen Milroe or a Jackson Dart or whatever, I still think you trade back up in the first round to take whoever your second player is going to be. The idea here is Andrew Berry, we know his draft failures over the years, they've been well documented. He needs to hit on some players in this draft that are ready-made, starting immediately type players that can contribute to this team from the jump in 2025. That's his goal with these, especially with these first 2 picks that he has in the upcoming draft. So he's got to get these right. And understanding that if you do nail them, if you do get them right, those are 2 players that you're going to want control over for that fifth year option. Like you're going to want control over that player, whether it's a quarterback or whether it's a different position. And again, if they go quarterback at 2, there's so many different paths. And I've gotten into this before, but what do they do at 33 if they go quarterback, right? Is it you take a receiver, like if Emeka Ibuka is there, do you maybe trade back up to get him? Is it that you go offensive line, you go left tackle, because we know this team needs a left tackle? Do you go running back? I think that'd probably be a little too early for running back still with how deep this class is. Or because you go quarterback at 2, maybe you go defense with 33, or you're thinking about going defense with 33. So then you trade back up and get that defensive guy end of the first round and have the 5 years of control of that player. So again, there's a number of avenues you could go if you go quarterback first. I think quarterback becomes what you're definitely doing at the top of the second round or at the end of the first round if you trade back in, if you don't go quarterback at 2. But even if you do go quarterback at 2, I still think that it makes complete sense and is almost a must for the Browns to trade back up, get that fifth year option on a guy by taking him late in the first round. And it's the same thing they did the year where they get Myles Garrett, Jabril Peppers, and obviously David Njoku all in the same draft class. Guys who they had fifth year options on for all those guys. Now, Jabril Peppers obviously didn't stick around. He wasn't here for the length of the entire 5 years of the Browns had control of him. But David Njoku was, Myles Garrett obviously was. And so that's the same sort of thing you're hoping to do. You're hoping to hit on 2 top flight players that are instant contributors, guys that are going to be foundational pieces of your franchise for years to come, whether that's a quarterback at 2 or a quarterback at 33 that you trade up to get in the first round, or whether it's the other way around and you take Abdul Carter or somebody else at 2, or trade back from 2 and take somebody else in the top 10. And then you're looking at a quarterback at 33, whatever the outcome's going to be. Trading back up to take a quarterback, trading back up to take somebody at the end of the first round is a no-brainer for me. And it feels like something that the Browns should be doing. Andrew Berry's generally been pretty aggressive, whether that's moving up or moving down on the draft board. I think mostly we've seen him sort of move down, not up. But he's always talked about being open-minded to both. And I think he's keeping an open mind, especially with this draft, which is going to be one he is measured by resoundingly how he comes out of this draft and the types of players that he adds or gains here. It's going to be looked at in a microscope. He's going to be overanalyzed in that way, who he picks here. So he's got to get these right. If you're going to get it right, you want 2 players that you can control for a longer period of time. And that also speaks to like just the cap situation that this team is in right now. They already have enough issues in terms of like these void years and money they're kicking down the road. If they can prolong paying somebody and having to do that with other contracts down the line, and you know that they have a fifth year option on somebody, especially a player that might be at a premium position like quarterback, like something along the defensive line, like wide receiver, whatever. It helps you down the line, like longer term, in terms of your cap situation by gaining that extra year of control for these guys. So I'm already looking at the I'm already sort of going into the draft with the assumption that Cleveland will look and do whatever they have to do potentially to get back up into the first round and take that second player, whoever it's going to be, instead of waiting to 33, because it just makes too much sense. You're one pick away from the first round. Your pick is kind of a pseudo first round pick anyway. You might as well get back up and move up just barely and give up, not have to give up a ton to do it, to get a second player that you think can be really, really good and an instant contributor for you, and know that you have 5 years of control of that player. It's smart business. I think Andrew Berry will consider it because he's generally pretty aggressive in terms of the way he does these things. And I think it's a no-brainer for him to try to pull that off here coming up on April 24th and in the NFL draft. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. More to come, obviously, next week. We'll see what the week ahead has in store in terms of more rumors, reports, inklings about what the Browns are going to do. And we'll be here to talk about it with you. So hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Show, or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs, Locked On Guardians. Thanks for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. Peace.